Okay, welcome to the commentary portion of the DVD where you get to hear my annoying nasal voice instead of the actual from the movie. But hopefully I'll be able to illuminate some of the things that we did to make the movie, and it'll provide a way to remember some of the things that happened in the process of making the movie. These are the opening credits, of course. They are a bit long, but there are two reasons they're long. One is the length of the song that Don is playing. There's several songs in the movie that Don plays on his piano, and this is one of them. And the other reason this is long is because I spent way too much time making this clock, and it needed to have a little bit more time on the screen, I thought. Here's the first picture of Don, and this should be really the first time that you have an idea of the movie has something to do with him. I tried to sort of disguise that in the cover of the DVD and in the DVD menus. There were some hints, of course, on the DVD menus of what the movie was about, but that was the first indication that it had something to do with Don Bergstrom. And here's Max and Tracy's big scene, which took several takes, as you'll see on the blooper reel if you haven't watched that yet. It's interesting to note that most of their lines are written on the various papers scattered around the table. You can see Max and Tracy reading their lines if you look closely. Maybe it's not actually a bit more obvious than that. It was a challenge also to keep Emma out of the scene. It was just the four of us at home during this time, and she was running in and out of the movie, she did a pretty good job of keeping herself occupied, so we thanked her for that. That was our big Bewitched special effect you just saw. The old everybody hold still and we'll change the scenery around while Tracy does a little incantation. And there's Max reading his line right there. You got it right that time. He didn't say, well, I won't spoil it. There's a great blooper that Max performs on that line.
Let's see what this album can do.
So here we are. Max is going to jump in this album. This is our first green screen shot to appear. These sort of amazed Max when they were all completed. Here's the second green screen shot. The green screen shots were done in the garage. We painted one of the walls a solid green color, and I had to paint some sheets of particle board solid green for the floor, and we had a little green screen set. And then in software, the magic of Adobe After Effects software, we were able to take out everything green from the images, and all that was left was Max. The magic of movies. Here's, I think, probably my favorite sequence that I put together. These maps I thought turned out really cool. I found these maps on the internet. They're maps that were images of maps from, I think, 1895. And I was able to, they were really big images, so they turned out great on screen, very good resolution, and I was able to stick them together and, again in software, zoom through them. It's just a shame that he lived in Illinois, which is in the middle of the country. I didn't get to zoom across the country. Because if he lived in Maine or something, it would have been a little more zooming around the maps. This is also a photo I found on the internet of two grain elevators, and added a little fire special effect. I think it was a little cheesy, but we went with it anyway. Here's Tracy's next big scene. She's actually, the camera was not crisp enough to pick up the fact that this box actually has the word bonbons on it. So she's in bed eating bonbons. And here I am. This was my favorite part of the movie. I get to sit and drink beer.
Go ask your mother, Max. I'm busy.
I was able to milk this for about 3 or 4 takes. Almost finished the beer. Started with a full beer. That tells you how long it took to get that right.
Wait, Grandpa, did your parents work hard?
Here we see some,
Dad and
I
mother
guess the
were
first,
both
well, we saw some old photographs in the
workers. They would get
part where
up
Max is
at
in the
4 or 5
album, but these
o'clock in the
are
morning on the farm,
Don's
several
parents,
cows to
mother
milk
and
before
father.
getting ready to do the day's farm work. Dad was very quiet, but
And the cows.
really
This
very
picture
good
has
man.
nothing to do with
Although he did have
Berstrom's at all. It's just a picture I found of cows. It was actually a color picture, which we turned into black and white.
cow kicked over a bucket of milk.
And the only violence in the movie,
The rump with
which gives it the PG rating, the inference of the cow getting beaten. Here we are outside. Max is barefoot with just a shirt on. It was probably 25 degrees out during that filming. This was one of my favorite finds on the movie. Don talked about going into town and seeing, I think going into Mattoon and seeing, going to a theater that showed only westerns, which I thought was incredible that they could have a movie theater that would only show westerns. And he listed off several of his favorite western stars. Hoot Gibson was one of the stars. And I was able to find on a great site called the Internet Archive, which archives a bunch of old audio, video, images, all sorts of different stuff that are basically in the public domain, either put there by the people that created them or are in the public domain because of their age. They've just reached the age that their copyright no longer applies. So they're in the public domain. There's a lot of books and things on there. There's a lot of newsreels from the 30s that they used to show in, when you went to the movies and they showed the newsreels before the movies. But there's also a lot of old movies, and this was an old movie that I found that starred Hoot Gibson, and that's Hoot on his horse. So that's the actual Hard Hombre, I think was the title of the movie. Perhaps a movie Don saw in the 30s. I think it was a 1931 movie. Might have been a little too recent. Don would have been in his later teens, I guess. Here is back outside. Emma, you can't get close enough to see, but Emma was not happy there. She wanted to come out and bounce, but that particular sequence took a couple minutes to get right, and by that time she was frigid, and the expression on her face was one of really disgust. She was not happy at that point. This is a picture of the Civic Theater that Don went to in Indianapolis when he moved there, and he was a bachelor. And it was another picture I found. I think I found that picture in the Library of Congress archive. And you can pay the Library of Congress for a nice quality image, or you can just take their low quality image off of their site. And the low quality image turned out better than I thought it would. I don't remember what big band this is. I'm not sure if it's one of the ones that Don mentioned. I don't think it is. But it's also a clip off of the Internet Archive. But it's definitely typical of what Don would have seen, I think, in the Civic Theater in the 30s in Indianapolis. This was probably, a TV show set or something, but gives you the idea.
Comedy shows coming in.
And now we're at Don's talking about some of the comedy routines that would come into the Civic Theater, and this is these are clips from a movie called Hell's a Poppin', which was a 1946 comedy. by the team Olsen and Johnson, who is the comedy team that Don mentions, specifically remembering from going to the Civic Theater. So this was about the only expense incurred, other than vast amounts of time, in making this movie. I went and purchased this video of Hell's a Poppin' for I think $18.99, and the reason I felt like I had to get it was because Don went on about this routine about the man delivering the plant to Mrs. Jones, and the plant gets bigger and bigger as the show goes on until it's a big tree at the end of the show, because he just can't find Mrs. Jones. And when I was searching on information about Olsen and Johnson, I came across this movie. I think it was on IMDb. They listed the movie Hell's a Poppin'. And in the cast of characters was such and such an actor whose role was described as the man looking for Mrs. Jones. So I thought, well, there you go. That's exactly what Don was talking about. So I bought the movie, and it was actually, and I watched the whole movie and found some clips that I thought I wanted to add the man looking for Mrs. Jones and give you a good idea of what Olsen and Johnson's routines were like and what they looked like. And it was a very funny movie. It was a movie about the two of them, Olsen and Johnson, making a movie out of their show that they used to do on Broadway and obviously travel around the country with. And so that's what the gist of the movie is. They're making a movie about their show. And I found their humor to be very funny. And here he is at the end. One of the last scenes, he's still looking for Mrs. Jones. Here's Max again in the green screen on his little car. We almost didn't get him fit in this little car, but he managed to fit in. The other option, if he didn't fit in, was to go to his Jeep, which is much bigger, but the problem with the Jeep is that it's green. It's a bit darker green than our green background, but I think it still would have caused problems in the green screening process, that the actual Jeep would have disappeared as well as with the background. So fortunately he fit in the little car.
Fords then had 3 pedals. Left one, put the car in low
This
gear,
is clips I found again on the Internet Archive of old,
on the left side.
I forget what this was called, something about
When
America on Wheels or something like that. And it's just these assorted clips of
was for reverse.
wild escapades on the first automobiles. I think
Learned to drive once and was
I'm not sure if these are mostly staged for the purposes of being funny, or if they were just sort of actually happened. I mean, the number of explosions and things going on with these cars makes me think that these were staged, but I don't know.
So that was the end of his attempting to drive.
The reason I like the way it worked out with the newspaper print around it. The reason I did that, though, is because when I imported the movie into my editor, it came out as taller than it was wide. And I didn't know what to do about it. I later learned, this was one of the earlier clips I did, I later learned that there was an easy way to re-stretch out the video to the dimensions it would have. You know, the normal dimensions of being wider than it is tall. But I didn't know that at the time, so I ended up with this small video. So I thought, what am I going to do with this? It's not going to fit on the screen, and got the idea of sticking the newspaper around it, which I think came out pretty well.
Tell me about when my granny was born.
Here we are with introduction to Betty Kay. This is a video of a train running at night that I found, and it was the best train video I could find, and as far as the length of seeing this freight train running, the length of time of the freight train running. But it did turn out a bit dark, so I wasn't that pleased with this little segment for that reason.
And started out there, and on the way out, we had to go.
We started with about 2 hours worth of Don talking about his life. Tracy had given him tapes back in '91, and I put some questions and some guidance of what to talk about, and he filled up about 2 cassette tapes, about 2 hours worth, and he spent a lot of time talking about cars. He spent a lot of time talking about moving from house to house. He spent a good amount of time talking about jobs he had. He did spend a good time talking about his childhood, but I think he got a bit tired by the time it came for him, his later years, when he had kids and grandkids and retired and those sort of things. He just didn't spend a lot of time talking about those things, so it was, it would have been, I think it would have made for a more interesting movie if there were more choices of clips for stories about his family and things like that. But I think he just got, by the time he had filled up one tape and was on the second one, he was just sort of going a bit faster and didn't have a whole lot to say about family life. Here's my second big scene. I don't know, I wasn't really pleased with that scene, I don't think. I don't think I came off very well. Max enjoyed that one, I think, the most, though. Here's one of my big special effects. This is an old photograph of barbershop, probably 1800s. Late 1800s is my guess. And there was this coin, but it wasn't really part of the photograph. It was something I stuck in. And then it pops up and spins around. It's a image of $50 from, I think it says 1877 on it. And Don's talking about the size of the bald spot on his head being the size of $50. This was probably my favorite clip of him talking. He just did such a great job of telling that story of how he was in the barbershop and and looked around and noticed that there was another guy in the shop, and poor guy, he was going bald. And turned out he was the only one in the shop. I thought, just the way he told the story, and it was just, I just had to put it in the video. But I couldn't come up with a great sequence to go with it, but so we put that together. Here's a story of Dave playing tennis with Snoopy characters. I'm not sure what the relevance to Dave and Snoopy is, but somehow seemed appropriate.
High school tennis teams. I don't think Dave's team ever won, but they were always over there.
How about my great-grandmother?
Next is my favorite clip of Don talking about his family life. There were 2. I think it's the next 2. The one about this one's about the car for Mother, as he called Irene, most of the video, or most of the audio. And the other is the surprise party that Betty and Dave gave for them for their wedding anniversary. And
a green 60 Chevy.
I think this standard shift seems to be an example of a memory that he has of Irene that it seemed to choke him up a little bit when he was talking about it. And I thought too it was a great example of the times
I gave
you know,
Dave the keys, and he
one of the
went up to
greatest
Mother, and
gifts you can give
she was
to a
fixing supper in
homemaker is
the
something to
kitchen.
make their life a little easier, and a
Dave
car
went up
that she
and
can
gave
go
her
to the
the
grocery
keys
store
and
with,
told Mother, this is
so she doesn't
because
have to
we
go
love
in
you.
the evenings or wait till the weekends.
And looked at the keys and couldn't figure it out for a minute, and then she realized what
Here's
it
a
was. And
old photo that
out
most of
the
these
front
old
door to
photos
look at it, and
are from the photo album that
Don Saunders and other
was in
Joe
Don's
next
possession when he
door
died,
were out there.
and will be given
It
to
was
Dave
quite a
and or
thing
Betty.
that,
And
Irene realized that she had her first
they had
car.
to do a lot of fixing up, especially the color ones. The color was just so bad on most of them. I don't know if it was from aging or from just the poor technology of cameras back then, or probably a combination of both. But we had to do a lot of color correction and
Do you like surprises as
to
much
those
as me?
photographs. But they turned out pretty well, I think. Here is the sequence where he talks about his or the surprise anniversary party, and then the family event,
And unbeknownst to
and some old photos
Irene and
of
Dave and
them.
Betty worked up a
I'm not sure who
party.
that is. I
So
thought
we
it was
were
Don,
playing golf
and then I realized maybe it's
one
not.
day, and
So
came home, and
this was
took
their
the car
actual
in the garage. There weren't any cars around because
wedding
we had
announcement.
gone
It's
over
in
to
their
some
photo
of the
album
neighbors and worked out a
from
plan
their
where
newspaper.
he would have everyone that came to the party to park in their driveways. So we walked in through the garage and through the laundry room and opened the door into the family room, and there
Here's
was
their professional.
people. That was.
It was
quite
also
an
interesting to
experience.
notice that the professional
Saunders were
photographs
there, and the Kohlers,
needed a lot less
all the
fixing up
Norma
than the
several over. We were
just
really surprised. We were
amateur
floored.
photographs.
They, Betty and
On to Southern Pines.
David arranged
He spent a little time talking about Southern Pines,
sandwiches
but
and
not a
things,
whole lot.
they
And
gave
really,
us,
I was surprised how little he spent
all
talking
our
about
friends
golf.
gave us a marble
That's one of the reasons we
coffee
had Max
table, which we
golfing
still
at the
have.
beginning
We're
of the
proud
videos. That was one of the
was
first
quite
clips I made when I was fooling around with
quite
the
a party.
software. I really expected there to be
Great-grandma
more about golf in the
told me
video.
something funny about my mom and Uncle Scott.
Had to put this
I know
photo
Irene
in,
says that
mostly just
when
for
she
the
would
hair.
babysit Scott and Tracy, there was no problem in babysitting Scott, or
And then this is
no problem in babysitting
my
Tracy.
attempt to be a little bit
But there was a
tricky by
problem
putting
sometime when she was trying to babysit
a
Scott
newer
and
photograph
Tracy.
on the wall
One
behind them
Scott
in
had
this
really
older
been
photograph.
teasing
There actually was a
Tracy
photograph on the wall in the back of
for a
this
long time.
picture.
Grandma kind of got
It was
tired
too
of it.
really hard to
So
see.
she
I spent
rolled
a
up
bit of time trying to get this to look
whacked Scott over the head.
better, that make it look like the photograph was really part of the scenery. It does. It's okay, but it's
Hit
not
him again, Grandma.
as what I was hoping for. And here's Max with his chance to play the piano. He did a pretty good job acting in this. He was never really had to try too hard to convince him to come do his scenes. He was mostly cooperative about it. Didn't require too many takes. I love this old photograph. This is Don how old could he be here? Maybe 3 to 5, something like that. And these little puppies that he's with. And then I found this older photograph, and I noticed when I looked at it closer that there's a grown dog that looks an awful lot like those puppies. I don't know if it's the same dog or not, but that was what I was trying to accentuate. This photo is from a postcard. They made it into a postcard, and I thought it was interesting that on the back of the postcard, I think Irene had written, here's a postcard. This one, this picture is not necessarily to show you how much snow we got, but to show you that the fact that of the strange occurrence of Don actually out there shoveling. And now we're at the end. So we hope you enjoyed it. Merry Christmas. I had a pretty good time making it. I learned a lot of things. And hopefully it'll be something you can go back to in future years and have a memory of Don and Irene. Merry Christmas again.